going to hit the record button,
Okay.
which I just did, and I am going to pull up my notes. And I heard you guys, God, I think it was just you and Hovida, right? Hovina.
Ovida.
Hovida. I keep substituting the wrong doggone consonant. But I heard you guys had some type of affair yesterday. Or am I mistaken?
Affair?
Not affair, but like a debate or some type of getting to know candidates.
There have been a lot of different ones that have happened in the past few weeks. I mean, we've done one with neighbors in Deer Ridge, and we've been attending all of these town halls and planning commission meetings, and there's a heck of a lot going on. She was at one yesterday that I had a conflict and couldn't attend.
Ah, that's the one.
Yeah. So,
okay.
But we're all trying to keep informed on everything that's happening, and when we can share information, and there's a lot to learn. There really is, and this town has a lot going on, so it's all good. It's all good. It's just you have to stay on top of it.
Absolutely. Well, and the thing is, when you get the job, and as a caveat, or not caveat, I can't find the right verb now, but I say that to everybody.
Full disclosure.
Yeah.
Full disclosure. I heard you say that to the other candidate, so I was expecting it. If you hadn't, I would have been upset.
Oh, okay. Well, oh, there you go. See, and you prove that you're watching these things.
It's a thing. It's
neighbors,
a thing.
Neighbors. I'm doing it for you guys. Well, I'm doing it for me. You guys are listening.
Well, I'm going to vote too.
Well, that's true. That is true. Well, I mean, I hope you do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, I'll tell you what. Let's jump right into it. And again, I know. Well, how about you introduce yourself and what the heck it is you're trying to do for our city?
Why on earth are you doing this? I'm Susannah Meyer, and I am running for District 3 City Council for Brentwood. This year has been a year for a lot of people, and COVID has changed the way a lot of people think, the way they decide they want to serve and give back and be involved. And a large part of the reason I decided to run was because of COVID. And the fact that it just really makes you decide you need to be more responsible and more engaged and give back. And so I thought, okay, what can I do in the community to really try and make it better? There's a few reasons. That's one of them. I have to admit, another one is our two incumbents that are running for mayor, Joel and Karen, are from my district. If they were running for district council in my district, I wouldn't be running. And in large part because incumbents are kind of a natural choice when you're looking for someone that you can trust. You already know what their track record is. So there's a tendency sometimes to just say, I know that name, I recognize that person, I know what I'm getting with that person. So that's another thing. My district, and of course this is the first year that Brentwood and a lot of other cities are going to district voting. The district that I represent has a large percentage of older adults in town. It's got your Somersets, all 4 Somersets, and it has Cortona and Westmont senior living communities. It has Trilogy, which of course is not the same. Trilogy is very active, but we're talking about the older portion of adults in town. And my background in large part is nonprofit work. I worked off and on for Meals on Wheels for many years. And so older adults have a special place in my heart, and I feel they don't always get a seat at the table. And so because of all those wraparound things, it just kind of felt like this is the year for me to put my hat in the ring.
All right. No, and you already started out the gate with some very valid points. One of the reasons why I'm doing this is because, as you said, I voted for incumbents pretty much because, as you said, all right, they're already there and I already know what I'm seeing. Good, better, and different. And this year I said, do I really know any of the candidates? And to be honest, I really don't. And so I know I'm not alone in this. We have new people in Brentwood. We have, I'm considered new Brentwood, and I moved in here 2003. 2003 for me. So, so that's it. So then there are, of course, people who have moved in here since then, but a lot of folks. And then the folks that you were talking about, the folks that have been here for a while, the third, fourth, fifth generation. of
Right.
Brentwood people, and we all have similar and unique concerns. I think the one common thread, at least this year, is COVID. It
And you
is a
know, it changes everything about life and work and family and how you live in general, but it also changes campaigning.
right.
So for you to be doing this, Danny, it means that more people are going to have access to asking questions and getting engaged with candidates where we don't have a lot of other opportunities to do that right now. I'm going to the farmers market, I'm doing social media, I'm, you know, doing what I can to get out there, but it's restrictive. You have to be very careful. You know, we can't campaign the way that it's typically okay to do that. So
Right.
like this is perfect.
No, and the thing is, this is the grand experiment. Maybe this is from this point forward the way to go. And I'm not talking about just me. I'm talking about the interaction online, because you can have a Zoom meeting. As a matter of fact, I recommend it now that because I was just thinking about it, some type of Zoom setup where you have a weekly, whether you win or not, type of town hall where
Mhm.
people like me can watch and chime in, you know, because you have the chat box and the whole shooting match, and you can reach, even if you only reach 2 or 3 people,
Mhm.
which I doubt it would only be that small, but even if you reach 2 or 3 people, well, they talk to each other. They truly do talk to your neighbors. That's how you found out about my thing. And
Absolutely,
so,
next door.
and,
Yeah.
and I've only started this, I don't know, Monday. Hey, but it's about you. It's not about me. So,
We
uh,
could talk about communications because that's really important. And I think the idea of continuing discussions, whether I win or not, and obviously I want to win, but if I don't, I still plan to be involved in these discussions, and I still plan to try and work with the people who are on council to make the city better. In fact, I've even said, if I don't win, and again, I'm going to say I hope I win, but if I don't, I plan to collect all of the notes that I've been gathering, and I've been having a lot of meetings to talk to different stakeholders and community groups. I want to gather all those notes and present it to someone on council who's receptive, because I think that's what we all should be doing right now anyway, is really gathering information and talking to people and finding out what the needs and desires are so that we can share that information. It's not just about being on council and winning a contest. It's about making the city better. And I think that's the focus we all need to be working on.
absolutely. And as you were talking, I'm trying to do 2 things at once because it's going to dive into a question about development. But yes, I agree that I think the only thing, and you said something about should interact. And again, I swear I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but it was what caught my attention was, you know, you as a representative of us need to talk to us.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, and I'll get off my high horse in just 1 second, but you know, a couple of the candidates talked about how the city needs to do this, how the city needs to do that. And with all due respect, when you win, you are the city.
Right.
You know, it's not the Civic Center, it's not streets of Brentwood, it's you. You're the living
Right.
manifestation of the city. So when people talk about, hey, I got this concern about this, I got this concern about that, and you hear someone say, oh, well, the city needs to do this, it's okay, well, then Susannah, you need to do this.
Right.
This
It's
happens.
absolutely, it's the responsibility of the council members, especially because they're the ones who are elected to their roles, to not only listen, but to solicit. And I think we could do, one of the things I'd really like to do is work with the new PIO whenever that position gets hired to do some better education to the general public. There's some cities around us, Pittsburgh is one, who has a really great interactive website that explains the basics of advocacy. Here's a video that talks about how to go to council and how to present your ideas and how to formulate your opinions in a way that's impactful and 3 minutes long and is going to get the attention. And you know, I think things like that, we've got so many great advocates in this town. I mean, that's the thing. I've been watching council meetings for years and been to some. The advocates in this town are so strong, but there are a lot of people that may not understand that they can and should be doing that as well. So it's the city and the council's responsibility to make people understand how to do that. You know, make it easier. And of course, and you know, as I've said that I'm an advocate for older adults, and so I would like to also say that I think there's a large portion of people that have very real and valid opinions about what should be going on in the city, but can't go to a city council meeting. Either they're disabled, they have no transportation, they might be older, they might be afraid to leave their homes and park somewhere and leave at night. And I do feel that those people need a voice too. So whether that comes through, some in-person town hall meetings, or if it comes from emails or whatever it is, we need to make sure people are represented. And I think that's part of the point of being council also, is to make sure that you're not just listening to the loudest voices, you're listening to the people who have feedback that is really impactful.
Right. The back of the room. You can always see the people in the front of the room, but it's the back of the room, the people who want to participate but don't know how. And that leads into the question, especially in your district and the demographics. I want to talk about the city plan. Now, I've had this discussion before, and I'm an old project manager. That was my previous life. And so I always say a plan without a goal is a wish. And we have a plan that has been in place for at least 6 years and has had multiple amendments, or even, things submitted to amend. Now, in project management terms, that's called scope creep. And pretty soon what happens is the plan no longer looks like what was originally signed off on. And so I want to find out when you are in the council chair, what will you do, or can you do, to help mitigate that scope creep? Because again, that plan was approved. I don't know what it is, and it's changed, but it was approved.
So development is one of the highest hot topics in this year's election. And it's not just in Brentwood. There are cities all over California facing the same drama when it comes to this really hot topic that people want to talk about. I'm going to start by saying I'm not anti-development per se. What I am is, and you're probably hearing this from other people too, we can't just blindly approve revisions as they come across our desk. Just say, sure, yeah, we can do that, because it might mean some initial revenue. We have to start really looking at long-term sustainability. And I think some of the projects, and we can get into names if you want, some of the projects that are being presented go too far from the general plan. That was just shot down, if you will, by the Planning Commission, Bridal Gate. It's not in my district, but anybody who says that doesn't impact them is just not seeing the full picture, because it impacts your traffic and your schools and your emergency services and all of those things that are citywide. So we have to look at all of these issues that are not just district specific, but city specific. Bridal Gate tried to change too much, and they tried to take away a lot of the commercial and make it more into residential, because of course there's more revenues that come from that for the builder. So I think the Planning Commission was right to shoot that down. And I understand the project's not dead. Of course, it's already been initially approved in its original form, but we need to really hold the developers accountable to what was originally approved, what is something that does align with the general plan, and what makes the most sense for Brentwood. And I did make a decision early on to not accept developer contributions. And I did that for the sake of, again, not being completely anti-development, that's not realistic, but just understanding that any decisions that I make, I want to be able to make just for the truth of what I think is best for the city, and not based on any kind of obligation.
No, and that's fair. And that, for me anyway, it's greatly appreciated, because it's going to roll into, this is going to be a two-part question. Bridal Gate, primarily because I really don't know anything about it other than the two words, and Sciartino Ranch, which is something I just discovered yesterday. And as I had said to somebody else, the only reason I found it was I was looking for something else. I was looking for questions regarding schools and the kids and parents in COVID. I came across this Sciartino Ranch. I click it, and I'm looking at the picture right now. We're talking about the grocery outlet. I kind of heard something about a while ago, but the Denny's, coffee, two pending sites, and then this monstrous available. From what I understand, No, actually, I don't understand that. Maybe this is where Bridlegate comes in. There are plans that were approved literally decades ago
Mm-hmm.
that have been sitting on the shelf. And then all of a sudden, now is the time to, for these plans to start, or these developments to start going forward. And the problem is for me that the Brentwood of 2003, when I came in here, is not the Brentwood of 2020. And so I guess the rant is we should have an expiration date on projects that were approved. The
Mm-hmm.
question is, what can you do to stop and mitigate these future type of plans?
So my question to you, and I want to get into developing that a little bit more too, but my question to you then is, if you're looking at an actual expiration date to a project, what do you do about the time and money and effort that's been invested in it so far? At the very beginning when the process was going through, and there's all these architectural fees and the planning meetings and all the time and effort and money that goes into that. I'm not saying I disagree with you, because
Right.
some of these projects are ridiculous in the way they're being now presented again. Bridlegate's a perfect example. But to just kind of be a devil's advocate, I don't know how you do that. How do you do that in a way that a developer now who decides they're going to buy a plot of land and maybe put in a mixed-use building and some restaurants and whatever, says, I'm going to buy this now, but I'm not going to be able to develop it for 2 or 3 years? How are they going to feel about us saying, well, okay, but we've got a clause. If you don't develop by this much time, you've lost everything. I don't
Yeah.
know. I think that,
No, that is legitimate, and you're the first person to ask me a question on something I asked, and
I like to ask questions.
Hey, that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Now, I will preface this by saying I don't know. However,
I don't either. I don't either.
Yeah, but if you look at projects in general, again, now I'm putting my project manager hat on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've done little gigs, and I've built oil rigs. So I've had budgets anywhere from $50,000 to $250 million.
Mm-hmm.
What both of those, and this goes back to a plan without a goal, is a wish.
Right. Yeah.
When you talk about project management, there's a thing called the triple constraint: time, resources, and money. Time
Mm-hmm.
is the one that, where the expiration date should be.
Mm-hmm.
If you bought a plot of land, developer says he lays down the initial groundwork, but he's already, in the back of his mind or her mind, they know they're not going to do anything for 10 years.
Right.
That seems like an awful long time.
That doesn't seem realistic, and it doesn't seem fair to ask the city to wait that long and to pre-approve something that could completely change in its entire scope. I completely agree with you. I don't think that's fair at all. I think if there is a way to do that, then yeah, you have to establish what your time frame is going to be like. And then of course the protocols along the way. Do we check in? Do we, what kind of revisions are we going to allow if it comes up in 2 years that the economy has changed so much we can't afford to do this anymore? But all of that needs to be spelled out from the very beginning. And I think that might've been a mistake that's happened so far too, that those things have not been to that degree spelled out from the beginning. Otherwise, the revisions proposed by the developer for Bridlegate would not have the conception that they would be approved. I think they would be, did you attend that planning commission meeting?
No, I've only attended one. I've watched one. And this is why I'm doing this, because
Mm-hmm.
I am woefully ignorant of the things, how the sausage is made. And so,
well, the beauty of it is these things are open and we can, but we don't always know about them. I mean, if you're connected to the people that know about them and they say, you need to attend tonight, we need all of our voices on there, that's great. And you can take part and you can feel great about, being involved in your city. But if you don't have that connection, the city could be better about communicating those things, So Bridlegate was a very interesting meeting, and I did speak up on it. My point I was making on that was circulation, because the developer was changing the amount of internal and external access to the community, which, especially given our fire situation and climate change, it's dangerous if you have to evacuate. I mean, Summer Lakes and Oakley had that exact same problem in this new development with fewer access routes. And then when they had evacuation, they had a delay with the fire trucks in and the people trying to get out. And we have to look at those things. And that's another thing where, for example, if you're talking about this expiration date, the climate changes that we've got now impacting fire the way they didn't 5 years ago even, you've got to look at that. You have to be able to project what kinds of things need to be looked at on a regular basis. If the contract and the plan and everything is still going to stay valid, let's look at these things more regularly so that we can improve and not have any surprises, really.
So it does sound like you understand about an expiration date. So,
I would support that, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, how? And again, of course, it's easy to say, but you're right, particularly about fire and the fire district, and that's a question, of course, that will come up. But we need to understand, and not necessarily climate change, because I know people tune out when they hear that.
True, yeah.
And that's fine. I have my opinions, and so I leave them there. But I say that to say this. When I woke up one morning recently to an orange sky,
yeah,
that was amazing. Because we've had smoke before last year, and we've had issues before, but we've never had an orange sky. And this isn't just Brentwood. I mean, it was San Francisco. I have pictures that people have taken.
Yeah.
But for here, all right, if we had a fire that was able to create that type of exposure of ash and dirt and everything else, then we really should be rethinking these existing plans. And again, right. I don't know what the legal aspect of it is when a plan. Now, you asked the question, I didn't really give you an answer with respect to time, but you're talking about a project that may be 2-3 years old. Okay, I get that. But there are projects that are still in limbo that have been sitting there since before the Great Recession. And they can it seems like they can drop the trigger anytime, and then they can say, hey, we were grandfathered in, so too bad.
Right.
So
yeah.
And I don't know if there's anything that you can do about those things, those projects that are already in, whatever the state you want to call it, shovel ready, what? But
good term.
Yeah, what can you do, or what should you do? Because anyone can do anything. They can
right, exactly.
But what should you do when you sit in that chair with respect to projects that are still in the stage where you could put an expiration date?
I think one of the things council needs to do, and the reason I asked you that question is because of your background, is to tap into the expertise of the people that are doing that exact work. So obviously you need to talk with legal departments, and you need to talk to planning commissions, and you need to pull all of the stakeholders into the room to figure out how to do that, put it on as agenda item and vote on it. But I think the expiration date is something that would be very wise for the city to do, given the economy changes on a dime, and the climate and things are changing every single year. Who would have thought a year ago we'd have COVID? And look at the impacts of it. So it doesn't make sense to have a blind invitation to buy now, build later, if you don't know what later is going to look like. Brentwood changes constantly, and irregardless of all the other things I just mentioned, it's just going to change. The city is growing so quickly that the Brentwood of today, like you said, is not the Brentwood of 2003 when you moved here. It's not the Brentwood of 2009 when I moved here, and that's even more recent. I'm a newbie compared to you.
So, yeah, and I'm still, you talk to someone in old Brentwood and it's like, no.
I know.
You had your house built before the millennium?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think, I do think that needs attention. And I think it's one of those things, once you get in there, you start remembering all the conversations you've had with people along the campaign trail and along your advocacy trail. Because I've done advocacy before, not specifically about planning, but this is what building relationships for and building contacts for. Like, I'm talking to some people now that I've never spoken to before, because I call them and I say, do you mind if I pick your brain? Do you mind if I learn from you? And they typically, they're very receptive. People want to be heard, right? So you build the relationships now so that later on you can say, you know what, we talked a few months ago. I would really like to continue that discussion now that I'm in a place where I can do something and take action. So yes, absolutely, mitigation for an expiration date would make sense. I don't know how that process would work, but I know it's something that I would certainly be willing to address once I got in the chair.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Now, this is going to be, and I'm going to tell you up front, I'm probably going to go down rabbit holes, and I don't
Okay.
do it. I'll try and dig myself out. But because it's all intertwined, we were talking about development, and you were talking about housing development. Now, to me, there's always, there's got to be a balance. And what I mean by that is, when I moved here in 2003, this was much more of a farmland than it is today. I'll tell you where I live later, but I live in a spot where Fairview wasn't even connected to the distance between Balfour and Lone Tree, and because there were farms there. Now, progress is progress, yes. But when you have developers who can basically throw gangs of money at a farmer who may have been here for generations, and he's not getting the subsidies, he or she is not getting the support from the city, it's hard to turn that money down.
Yeah.
And so how can you address that? Or, is it something that should be addressed? Maybe it's just, just the way of life. And life is, this used to be a farming community, and now it's not.
So I don't agree with that. And I did mention, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about how I ended up getting here. In 2009, we actually had I lived in Pleasanton for 15 years, started raising my kids there. We had next door neighbors who were moving to Brentwood, said, you have to come and see this place. It's a beautiful community. It's an amazing group of people that are very welcoming, and this farm town and all this kind of thing. And we were like, no, kids are gonna go through school. We're not gonna take them out. But we decided to come and visit, and drove down the streets, and people actually, like, if you're getting out of a parking lot, people would let you go. And people in their front porches waving. And Pleasanton is a nice town, but it started to get a little snooty for us. And Brentwood was a completely different community. It was almost to, in effect, stepping back in time a little bit to the kinds of things that people really want to live in, a kind of a community where people want to raise their families. And we loved the ideas that the teachers teaching students here often were raising their own children in the same town where they were living and teaching. And it just breeds this accountability and this sense of community that we loved. I do not agree with the idea of letting the town progress to the point where we're not a farming town anymore. I think it's a huge asset for us. It's a charm. It's something that when you talk to the general public, and I'm sure you do this all the time, people don't want to lose that. They don't want to lose the agricultural history that we've got. It's important to us. There are ways to adapt that into still bringing in revenue to the city and still allowing our legacy farm families to continue. And I think those are the approaches we need to look at. If you look at stuff like, I was talking to someone who's really involved in the ag community, and we were talking about if you drive in through Vasco, that you now see all these beautiful, I think it's almond trees and grapes. I think it's almond trees.
Grapes for sure. I'm not sure about
grapes for sure. There's trees also. And it identifies Brentwood as an agricultural community. And what a beautiful thing that is. When we first moved here, and I should say, because I'm on a rabbit hole for a second too, we moved in when the recession was happening. The house that we had in Pleasanton was exactly half the size of the house that we have here. We are entertainers. My husband and I absolutely love to entertain. Our kids are, they have a lot of friends and all that. And I don't for a second take for granted the fact that we got this big, beautiful dream house in a way that we could afford it. So there isn't a day that goes by that I don't walk into my house and I go, wow, I can't believe I have my dream house. And there is a reality to that. There's the old school, new school, Brentwood and all that, but the community and the homes and the schools have treated us so well. And this is why I love this town. And I don't want it to change to the extent that it loses its identity. So that was my little rabbit hole about,
Sure. No. Hey, that's why I brought shovels. So
yeah,
that's not a
and it
problem
wraps
at all.
around. It wraps around a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's really just, it's all about the adapting the old and the new Brentwood. And I think the farmlands are, and the farmers are doing some really good work when it comes to U-Pick and the farmers markets and the farm stands. And all those are really terrific things that people come to Brentwood for. And I've said this before in other interviews, I think we need to do our farmers market year round. We're an agricultural community. We have farmers that we're supporting locally, and it makes sense to do that. There are towns doing it. They aren't farm towns. They just happen to be different as far as their promoting of this kind of thing. I think we also need to look at the whole, the lifestyle of it, the whole day event kind of thing. So when you have people coming to U-Pick, because typically they're gonna wanna come early in the day, it's hot, it's summertime, and things warm up and get crowded. You bring them into town and then they go home. And I think we could really do a better job of keeping them in town, making sure that they know, like when you go to the U-Pick farms, give them some materials that talk about what you can do for lunch, for example. Talk about some of our shops and some of the fun things you can do, and hand out some recipes that you're for the fruits and vegetables that you're picking up. I think I have a marketing and community engagement and branding, that kind of thing. So I always think about Brentwood in terms of how do you brand it so that it becomes more attractive and becomes a destination. And this agritourism thing, I think, is a brilliant way for us to do that. I think there's a lot of potential for us to move forward and progress in a way that makes sense for the city, it makes sense for the farmers, but doesn't lose us our charm. There's a lot we could be doing with that. I love the idea of rezoning when it comes to some places that farmers could actually have a little bed and breakfast or a small inn or a cafe on their farmland, something along those lines. Those are the kinds of rezones that make sense to me. And those are the kinds that are going to keep our farmers in town and sustainable and be able to carry that legacy on to their families the way they've always done from their grandparents and great-grandparents. And those are the things that are going to keep Brentwood being Brentwood. I'd really like to see that happen.
And you're preaching to the choir here.
Long answer.
No. You mentioned farmers market, and you mentioned you wish it was year round. So why can't it be?
I don't know. I know that in Pleasanton it was year round. And again, that's not an agricultural community. It's just one that was more known for that being a destination. Like people would come on a Saturday, and it's part of what you do when you go to Pleasanton. It's right downtown. You wander around. There's all these shops and restaurants. It was a destination. And I think part of that, it's still Pacific Coast Farmers Market Association. It's still the same governing agency, if you want to put it that way, that's managing the farmers markets. Now, and a lot of them are managed by different organizations, but this one is PCFMA, I'm pretty sure. So I would reach out and ask them, how do we do that? How do we change this so that we can make this a year round? And I know, winter is something entirely different. People end up canceling because of rains or bad air, whatever it is that people cancel for. So that has to be taken into consideration. I don't know why we wouldn't start a conversation. We're a farming town. And honestly, you can talk about the local grocery stores that are trying to sell local produce, and I absolutely applaud them for doing that. But there's still nothing like getting it right from the farmer. Farm stand, farmer's market, U-Pick, whatever it is, it does taste different. So I think the more we can encourage that and remind people that that's who we are, the better we're going to be for bringing in that kind of development.
Yeah, again, I agree 100%. Now let me climb out of the rabbit hole. Let me ask you, if you had a magic wand or blue skies, basically unfettered in what you want to have Brentwood be, what would be your 5 items, your 5 wish list if you just had absolute autonomy?
5, okay. And this is magic wand stuff, right? Okay. I would like to see it be a wine region, like associated with a wine region, so that the grapes that our farmers are growing are actually getting the same amount of money as the grapes from like your Napa or Livermore. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see the downtown further developed into something that is more cohesive with the farms and connected with some of the other potential tourist attractions within the city. If that means like the wine trolley, for example, and some kind of a harvest time trolley. That's actually a third thing. that's another part of the tourism piece of it. But I like the idea of the trolley idea, whether it's wine or harvest time, whatever it is. Obviously, I'd like to see our emergency response times at a point where everybody's comfortable with it and everybody's receiving fare, regardless of where they are within the district. And then fifth, I'd really like to see people understand that development is not just going to come and land in our lap and we're going to be okay with it without a fine-tooth comb going through it like that. You know, if you ask me this an hour from now, we're gonna hang up and I'm gonna go, I wish I'd said. But off the top of my head, those would be my top 5.
And the beautiful thing about this
Can I have
is
6?
you can have 6. Go ahead.
Okay, I did, and this is one of my platforms. It should have been my top one.
Sure.
One of my platforms is to make Brentwood more livable for all ages and all abilities. And I'm talking about like some of these 8 to 80 towns that are actually specifically targeting their planning around making sure sidewalks are wide enough for strollers and walkers and wheelchairs, for example. There needs to be a better approach on that, a better approach on making sure that all different ages in Brentwood have an equal voice and an equal say, that people of every physical ability and cognitive function level have activities that mean something to them and are impactful, and that they feel they have that voice. So that's dream world. That's got to be the top of my list. And I could talk about that for forever. But if you're looking for a bullet point, I would certainly add that one.
Okay. No, and that I'm glad you gave me the 6 because this is going to get into the topic. Homeless but more, and I don't mean this to sound callous, but the soon to be homeless. All right. I lay that out because we have new building development coming in Brentwood. We have, members of the city and, leaders in the community who are trying to promote that growth for all the reasons you just said, taxes and so on and so on. But hypothetical, let's say there was an approval of 1,000 new homes, but you had 1,000 existing homes and residents who are soon going to lose their home, who will soon be homeless, whether it is homeless, they move, or homeless, they are on the streets. How do you jive promoting building new homes while acknowledging, or maybe you're not acknowledging, the fact that there are people who will soon be homeless?
So again, Danny, we're talking about some of these housing developments that have been approved, right? And once they've been approved and once all of the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, we can't put some sort of qualification in there about, well, we can only build these if we can also house our homeless. I mean, those, in that way, it's not connected. The homeless issue is huge, and especially with COVID, there are way too many families that are struggling to get food on the table. There are people that are living in tents right now that have jobs that they're living in tents because they want to be able to feed their families.
Right.
We're in a really weird place when it comes to that right now, and I don't know what the answer to that is, because I agree with you. I wish there was a way to somehow balance that scale a little bit, and I don't know how you would do that with new development versus people losing their homes. I don't see how the two can really be in sync based on how development works and how developers sue if they don't get what they want. You know what I mean?
Right. No, and this goes back to we already have whoever is developing and building right now, this very moment. You drive around near Garen.
And you see a ton of it. Yeah.
So for those structures and those developments, well, no, there isn't anything you can do. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about a swap or the mixed use. And I use air quotes because, I'll go into it, if you want to talk about after this, I'll explain why I use this. But that being said, you have, and again, I'm referring specifically to the soon to be homeless. All right. Yeah. Because I've been there. Where I was telling this to one of the candidates. I literally was counting quarters and stuffing them in cylinders to pay the mortgage. And then through the grace of God, something happened. But I've been on that side. And so, you know, you look at this event called COVID, and you have, there's a moratorium on evictions, but,
Right.
you know,
It doesn't last forever.
Getting wiped away.
It doesn't get wiped away, and it doesn't last forever.
Right. And so you can, let's say you don't have to worry about being evicted for 3 months. All right. And I'll use apartments because homes may be a little bit different. But you don't have to worry about being evicted from your house.
Mm-hmm.
If you're paying $1,500 a month, well, at the end of 3 months, you owe $4,500, and the landlord is not, you know, not just going to wave a magic wand. All right. Now, again, I'm talking about just Brentwood. This is not unique to our city.
Right.
What is unique is the opportunity to, you know, save these, you know, soon to be homeless, because with all due respect to those who are suffering right now and living in tents and or, you know, living in their cars and things like that, you know, the stuff people don't want to see because it's over behind J.C. Penney's, or it's, you know, they're sleeping in their car and, you know, they happen to find a good spot where they're not going to get disturbed. That is something that needs to be discussed. That being said, is there an opportunity to keep people from going into that? Well, we have no choice because we got booted. You know, that, for example, you know, can we create a bond measure, or, you know, a GoFundMe? I don't know. The slush fund, the city, you know, they pull open the drawer and, you know, start rolling out 20s, whatever the case may be. You know, is there something that you could support that's viable?
So for me, the homeless issue is one of many that comes from social services, which again is one of my platforms. And I can tell you that East County, and you may already know this if you've heard about this in the past, but there was a study done by an independent financial organization, I don't know how long, 8 years ago, I want to say, to compare East County dollars versus West County dollars. And for every $8 spent in West County, $1 was spent in Brentwood, or not, excuse me, Brentwood in East County. There was a disparity back then. So 8 years ago, when this was discovered, when this study took place, there was some focus at that time at trying to make everything a little bit more balanced and equitable, and it, you know, get East County a seat at the table there. We're not there yet. We have community leaders, we've got elected officials that represent us here in this area that are trying to work on nonprofits as a safety net for our area, because we don't have enough of that kind of support. The homeless situation developed from part of that. Brentwood made a decision a couple of years ago to not apply for funding from the state that would potentially address an issue like this. And I think the fear at the time was talking about, if we say we've got a homeless problem, then we're inviting more homeless to our town, sort of thing. And I think more that that kind of funding could have been used for exactly what you're talking about, helping someone to pay rent for a month or two so that they don't end up losing their homes, like trying to have that safety net we were just discussing. So the state does at times have, I mean, clearly with Project Home Key and Room Key, the state is looking at different ways to address those issues and different ways of doing transition housing. No one yet at this point is addressing the specific issue you're talking about, which is people who are on the verge. Right now, they're okay. 3 months from now, they won't be okay. If COVID continues, if they can't reopen their small business, if they, you know, can't get back to work because they're not essential, these are the people right now who are suffering silently and without enough attention. So I do know that the state is looking at that. I know that they're trying to find programs. They're hoping for some federal bailout money. Who knows what's going to happen with that? We do need to address that. I don't know what the answer is, but I even wonder sometimes if there's different kinds of housing that could be a little bit more affordable. That is, someone brought up to me mobile homes as an alternative, just to reduce the costs a little bit, but still have a roof over your head. I don't know that that's the great option, because there isn't a lot of space right now where that would be approved, but we need to be better about affordable housing. We don't have enough, and I'm not talking about Section 8, I'm talking about affordable, for people who need to downsize if they can no longer afford their homes, or if they're experiencing a major challenge in their economics. Can they downsize into something where they could still keep their kids in the same school? Or for that matter, seniors who need to downsize if they're house rich but income poor. We need to be better about that. I think there are people looking at this issue. I would 100% be one of them, because I feel strongly that it's been ignored. It's not just a city issue. You hit the nail on the head when you were talking about that. We're not the only cities experiencing it, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't give it the same level of attention as we do all these new developments and all these people that can afford these really beautiful big homes. Our middle class, our people that are on the verge of going one way or the other, they need attention. I agree with you on that. I don't know what the answer is off the top of my head, because so much of that is based on COVID, and we've got COVID recovery that we really need to address. Some of that will come from CARES funds, and it has so far. Maybe there's going to be a federal bailout. The state is going to have to really dig in deep. The budget for next year is going to be, there's going to be people losing, getting pay cuts and losing their jobs so that we can afford to put money towards social services. Measure X, if Measure X gets approved, potentially some of that money could go towards social services that are underserved right now. It's a bigger discussion than we're going to have time for right now, but it 100% needs attention.
No, and didn't expect I asked for the magic wand, blue sky. So, but the thing is, if it's not discussed, then it can never be addressed. Now, this will roll into, because you mentioned Section 8. And for this community, there are certain key words that people will, have the absolute wrong impression of, and the mindset. You had mentioned the monies that could have been available, the city decided not to accept, and the rationale being, well, we don't want to attract. So Section 8 I know falls under that. We don't want to attract. The question I'm getting ready to ask in a little bit about diversity in business, whether it's WBE or MBE. And I'll ask that question in a minute, but this is, my second rant now. To those in Brentwood who have older ideas, it's not that I'm advocating, and I don't think you're advocating, some type of massive change, and that if we do these changes, oh my God, we're going to look like Portland, or some other crazy, misconstrued, place. So I'll get off my rant now and go to the question. With respect to diversity in business in Brentwood, when I came out here in 2003, my son was a senior at De La Salle. My younger kid, he finished school at St. Peter Martyr, graduated at Heritage. I say that to say this: around 2009, 2010, when my eldest was an adult and able to go out and enjoy young adult things, there weren't any young adult things in Brentwood. And the attempts to having young adult things out here in Brentwood always seem to get scuttled. And so I'm not necessarily putting my finger on the pulse and saying diversity or lack thereof. It's more of a, how do you address, the idea of, Walnut Creek has supper clubs. Blackhawk has supper clubs. Why can't we encourage business along those lines? And if we could encourage business along those lines, how would you do that?
So you're touching on a lot of different subjects, but in large part, and I'm doing the same thing. I think the two of us can just do this.
Yes.
But to start, I think we have some NIMBYism in town. That in itself is a very negative term, but I think a large part of that "not in my backyard"ism comes from people not understanding and being afraid of what they don't know. So when you talk about things like Section 8, just to get back to that before we move forward, I don't think people that are in the situation of trying to raise a child as a single parent, for example, should be shamed for doing that, for working really hard to be able to keep their child, having a good, solid life. I think there's ways of managing Section 8 where it does not have to be obviously Section 8, and frankly should not be, because there should not be shame involved in that if someone's willing to work hard for having whatever opportunities are given to them, if you want to put it that way. Right. That was a Section 8 thing. My husband is one of 9 kids, and I can tell you that they had a lot of struggles, and so he is always very grateful to programs that understand that no one's looking for a free ride. I shouldn't say that. Some people are looking for a free ride, but for the most part, people in a situation like that are doing their best to get food on the table. They work as much as they can possibly work. They're trying to have a solid, stable life for their families, and there shouldn't be shame in that. So my husband is always the one that, when everybody says, can I have $5 for this group or for that group at the grocery store, he's always doing it. So that's one thing. When you're talking about our youth, that's another issue altogether. Johnny Rodriguez is doing a fantastic job of really promoting the idea of let's finally do something for our youth in town. And part of that is whatever the youth center, teen center activities that are a little bit more inclusive and engaging and interesting. And that's a great thing. We could talk about that too. But to even carry that further, my 2 sons are young adults at this point. They both graduated from Heritage, and for them to think about trying to buy a home someday, that is probably not going to happen in Brentwood. As much as Brentwood's one of the more affordable cities in California, as far as Northern California Bay Area, it's still not affordable to our young adults who are trying to move out on their own or start families or whatever. So that's another issue entirely. If you're okay with, actually, the business is something else. This was kind of 4 different parts that led into one thing. I've talked with some of the small business owners because my husband is a small business owner. One of my platforms is to really look at how we can support them better and how we can get them through COVID and help them to grow their businesses. And part of that is also, how do you bring small businesses to us so that we've got that kind of, backbone of economy of our any good sized town. And I think what I'm hearing when I talk to people in this realm is that the city does have a lot of restrictions and guidelines and ordinances that make doing business hard, not just keeping a business, but opening a business. And things that when you look at it, why are we spending so much time, writing citations for this or that, when really this business wants to do their best and stay in town and support the local economy. So I would really, when I get in there, I would really like to take a look at what some of those ordinances are to see what we can do to bring more people in. We've got a lot of people graduating from local, community colleges and high schools that have these fantastic ideas and are taking them elsewhere. Some of the businesses that could be launched here and could be really innovative for our city and bring in a whole new interest and different kind of economy, different kind of people that want to be a part of it, they're just going elsewhere. They're not being heard and they don't feel valued. So I think part of it goes to that too. And that's all, to wrap all of that back around. It just goes to Brentwood being a little bit more open and less restrictive, in a lot of ways.
And believe me, it sounds like we think alike. That's why I had to warn you about the rabbit hole to begin with, because somehow or another I sit there and go, wait a minute, how did I get here?
Yeah, well, I think we looped that one around, didn't we?
Right, we looped it around. And I was looking at my notes as you were speaking, the last hot button topic that has been asked of me is, I'm going to preface this or give you a prelude, and that's my wife who just walked in.
Hi, wife.
That's Karen.
I'm Susannah. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Susannah. Nice to meet you too.
See, Dan Rather would never
Thank
do
you.
this. Dan Rather would never do this. So, but let me prelude this for you. All right. Firefighters. Their job is unique. They don't know when they get up and put on their uniform if they're going to be able to come home. All right. So they put their lives on the line every day. Teachers, their role is unique. Not everyone's cut out to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And there are, circumstances that are beyond people's control. And I'll use the you word, not you, but yin, that kind of constrains things. All right. But we have a very low tolerance for teachers who are not doing what they need to do, which is to better the community through our kids. So there's the preface. I say that because I'm going to throw out the police.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like firefighters, their role is unique. Like firefighters, they don't know if they're going to be able to come home that day.
Yeah.
All right. Like teachers, their role is unique, and they're here to help protect the community. All right. Now, any job, and I've had all kinds of different jobs in my life, but in every job, in every workplace, you know the people who excel and you know the deadwood.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and I used to manage, that I had the philosophy of working them up or working them out and rewarding those who have excelled. I don't understand why we can't, and I'm just talking about Brentwood, I'm not talking about the nation, why we cannot have that same philosophy with our police. Because it's not a blue life, it's a blue job. And I know people hate hearing that, but it is. This is not, I'm not talking about Black Lives Matter or blue on brown crime or any of those things. I'm just talking about as a job. It's a job. It's not something that it's a right. It's not something that is you inherit and pass down from generation to generation. Like any job, if you excel, you get rewarded. And if you can't cut it, then you should find something else to do. All right. Lastly, before I give you the floor, when people say, that they do a hard job and, we ought to give them a break and all this and that. It's not that I'm not agreeing with that, but I love playing basketball. I'd love to be in the NBA, but I'm 60 years old, 5'8", and overweight. So no matter how much I love to be in the NBA, I can't do it. So, because this is not defunding the police. I am not a proponent of defunding the police because that gives them all a haircut, and that's not fair. Mm-hmm. Because it treats those officers who excel the same way as they treat the officers who should have been out a long time ago. So I'm not a fan of defunding, but I am a fan of addressing this. So how would you address this?
So I would agree about I'm not a fan of defunding either. Accountability, that's something entirely different. If you want me to specifically address police?
Yes.
Okay. So my day job allows me opportunities to learn things that are not always, the general public are not always learning.
Okay. You work for the CIA?
No, I work for, I'm a East County district representative, senior district representative for a senator.
Oh, okay. The way you said it, it was like, yeah.
Well, no. And when I say that, all I mean is that we all bring different skill sets and experiences and talents to the table. Sure. One of the things that I've learned in my job is, I've got a lot of relationships with a lot of people in East County, and I have conversations with people that some other candidates might not have based on what I do for a daily job. Okay. That's all. So as far as the police goes, I know that when the protests were happening and when things were really reaching their fevered pitch about all of the reform that needed to happen within police, thank God, our police department and others in this area, these police chiefs were all very receptive to the idea of reform. Reform to me is not a bad word. It is not saying anything negative. It's not assigning any kind of a label to anyone. All it is saying is that the police chiefs that are about it understand that they need to be accountable. They understand that it isn't just a job. It is something that you have to, like you said, you have to earn the ability to be rewarded and to to keep your job and to be promoted and to move forward and have a stronger presence in what you're doing. So all of those things are part of that accountability. And I think police should be as accountable as any other career path, if you will. Maybe even more so because of the fact, not maybe, but more so because of the fact that they carry lives in their hands. And if I thought police didn't understand that and didn't recognize it and weren't receptive to the idea of accountability, then I might actually consider defunding. But I don't believe that. And I think Brentwood is a unique city. Again, we're talking about Brentwood. We're not talking about East County, the Bay Area, anywhere else. I believe that our police department and our police chief understand that they are accountable. I went on a ride along with a police officer who did an amazing job. She was, putting her life on the line. We pulled somebody over who was grandstanding, speeding, screeching right in front of her very clearly. Pulled the car over. It's a sports car. Everything's tinted, and the hand comes out the window with the phone on. I think, and I went to the, I can't remember what it's called, when they have their meeting before the shift starts and they all get together in that room and they discuss, okay, today, here's what's going on in town. You've seen it on TV.
Like NYPD Blue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I attended that meeting. We'll have to look it up later and I'll send you a message.
Oh, no. Well, here's what I mean. I tend to joke. NYPD Blue, the series from the 70s and 80s.
I remember it.
These kids don't. See, I'm old, so I remember.
I'm old too. I remember that show.
Okay. So please go ahead.
What I was going to say is I attended that meeting before I went out on the shift with this officer and before we did our ride along. The chief invited me to be a part of this meeting and to just drill in and just to learn, hear the conversations and to understand and to see the way they try to support each other, and yet they remind each other that this is, it's our community. We're here to serve them. And I think as much as reform still needs to happen, and I don't think anybody in a position of authority would tell you otherwise, I think they're making the attempts. If you look at the police chief, I asked a question about school resource officers because there's a lot of drama and a lot of really dramatic conversations in other cities around resource officers. In Brentwood, we've got a history of our resource officers being loved by our students. As I told you, my sons went to Heritage. Heritage, the school resource officer, when that person left, I think there was this huge party and everybody was, sometimes it's like we're our own little world here. And in some ways we can be a bit sheltered. I am absolutely not going to tell you that I don't racism exists in our city, because clearly it does in the schools and in the city in general. And we absolutely need to do something about it. The diversity commission that's being formed to start addressing that's a good step. The focus of the police on the school resource officers and their relationships with the students, that's a good positive thing. I think there could be some better training when it comes to mental health response. And I think when you start talking about the police going to a call in a homeless camp, for example, we need to make sure that officers are trained to be able to diffuse things a little bit more. I think that's being looked at as a reform. So in and of itself, I think the answer to your question is accountability, absolutely, but I wouldn't necessarily judge them and say that they're not accountable. I would say that they are acknowledging that some change needs to happen and looking at ways of doing that, if that answers your question.
That answers the question, but I'm going to drill down just a little bit more.
Okay.
All right. Again, I've worn many hats over my life. One of them, I worked at a bank that, a national bank. They shall be nameless, but they used to have a TV show back in the 50s in black and white. So you guys can Google that too. Anyway, I was fortunate. I was able to deal with the C-level executives. And to be honest, every time I heard from them and they would say exactly what you were saying, by the time it filtered down to say, the base folks, the worker bees, that message really never rings true. And, so at the end of the day, and I'm not saying you're not going to do this, but everything you said, what needs to be done and everything else, and that everyone knows it, well, maybe that's part of the problem, is that everybody knows it. but no one's doing anything about it. Now the chief, if my understanding is that the chief reports to the council. So, and let me ask that question first. Is that correct?
From what I understand.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. All right, so I can't imagine, again, now I'm talking about any job. You can take police out of it, put job X right here, and that's how I'm addressing this as job X. Job X, the CEO may not know everything that's going on in the minutia, but that first line manager certainly does. That second line manager should, more often than not doesn't. That third line manager should, but he relies on this person who uses this person as an excuse for allowing the flotsam to continue doing what they're doing. So now you're coming in as a CEO, and everything you said, I applaud 100%. I'm sure, I can't imagine a candidate saying, no, we're not going to do anything. You know, chief can do whatever he wants, and you guys are just going to have to accept that there are bad cops out there. Too bad, so sad. Or even worse, there's no problem here in Brentwood.
Right.
And so before I get off my soapbox and my rant, it's nice that you're saying that, and I applaud that you're saying that, but you know, they're saying there needs to be, I need to lose weight. So, but then I understand and I acknowledge that I need to lose weight.
Right there with you.
But I gotta go out and exercise. So I know what I need to do, and I know what I need to do to get that done. But that big gap between needs and does is what I guess I'm drilling down to you and asking you, okay, you know it needs to be done, so what are you going to do?
So I think the other thing to make note of is Brentwood has had investigations in the past. You've probably heard that yourself, of the police department. I don't think there's a city around that hasn't. And I think
even Mayberry had an episode where Andy got in trouble. So
yeah, okay. So the due diligence, obviously. Now, if you're getting complaints as a city council about anything along those lines, yeah, your responsibility is to initiate some sort of investigation, whatever that path looks like. I don't know if the police department, like if a complaint were to come into me as a city council member, would I go to human resources? Would I go to, you know what I'm saying? I'm not clear on what the path would be. But I hear what you're saying when it comes to action versus words. Words are very easy. We can all use them, especially if we're public speakers. We know what we're saying and how to engage a crowd. The actions are what we really need to look at. I can't give you the action of something that hasn't happened yet, but I can tell you that part of what I'm trying to run on is the integrity and the communications and the accessibility and transparency and all that, because it's all important to me. If someone were to call me and say they have a complaint about something and I didn't act on that, then I imagine that person is going to go around and tell everyone they know that I did nothing about it. And this is, if you're talking about people that do want to get reelected, that's a really stupid mistake, frankly. You've got to start the way, you know, the plan, like right now, the way I'm campaigning is the way I would want to run office. Right now, if people need to reach me, they reach me. We have discussions. I agree to do interviews like this, even though I was nervous about it because I don't know what to expect from you, right? I'm starting the way I plan to move forward. I want to be the person that will give people the time and value their opinions and their feedback. And I think that a lot of that goes back to that accessibility thing, Danny. If someone is going to call you with a complaint, whether it's about landscaping, trash being left somewhere, a small business who's being harassed because of their ordinances, or a police department that's not listening or treating someone fairly, all of those things, action is required. You do have to act on that. You just have to know what your paths are. And frankly, I don't know what those paths are yet. But I am saying that I think the accountability has to be there. I've got a history of demanding accountability from people. One of my sons is on the autism spectrum, and the teachers, some of the teachers that worked with him should not have been in the teaching field, and we did not sit down and let it go. We fought that fight because, you know, people need to be heard, they need to be accountable. It kind of goes back to that same thing. You don't go into a job and assume that you can just talk and not do the job. It would be the same for me as it would for someone in the police department. to be able to go in there and just talk and paint a pretty picture with words. The action is what's going to count for them and for me. It's the same thing.
Golf clap. No, because and again, well, this is about you, not about me. So with that in mind, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like to throw out there for our neighbors to hear? You didn't drop names, by the way. You asked me when we first started, do you want me to give names? And I was like, but
Yeah,
I didn't give names.
I think I do a lot of relationship building, and I've done that in every job I've ever had. And I think, regardless of what my specific experience is, I have not been a council member before. I've not been an elected official except on a small coalition and a preschool board and things like that. So I've done those things, but being on council would be new to me. That doesn't mean that I wouldn't excel at it, because I'm like you, and that I've had some different things in my background that have all kind of led me here. Frankly, some of those things that carry over, those, the relationship building and the marketing and the branding and the engagement and the speaking up for people without a voice, those are all things that kind of make me feel like, I can do this, and I can do this in a way that's going to represent the city and my district in a way they haven't been represented before. I find those things really important. I really respect the people that are out there advocating, and there's a lot of great organizations that are hyper local, that are developed from Brentwood to defend Brentwood. And I absolutely admire that. I think these people are fantastic because they're so driven, and they're willing to put themselves out there, and they're willing to put the time in. I love that. I have been to a lot of council meetings virtually and in person, and I haven't done as much speaking because of the kind of work I've done in my past. But it doesn't mean I haven't been paying attention and learning from it. I am happy to pick brains of people. And I think some of the situations that Brentwood finds itself in, as far as things that we could be doing better, there's no reason we can't be copying what another city does. Livermore does some great work with their downtown. When they did their revitalization of their downtown, it was amazing. And it's crowded with people that come in for the day and spend money in town and those kinds of things. And as I mentioned, Pittsburgh does a really great job with educating people on their website and being a little bit more engaging. Antioch does a great job of really being a little bit more open to new businesses coming into town. Oakley's got some great stuff going on. There's no reason we can't tap into the knowledge that our neighboring towns are already using to make themselves succeed. We all need to work together. Some of this stuff is regional. And I think that's a really important thing to note. And then I go back to that equitable and fair and representative and livable city for everyone. And that's critical for me. And I like I said, the background in nonprofits and working to support the needs of seniors, it means that I am going to be not only focused on that, but I'm boots on the ground on that. And I've done a lot of advocacy. And if you search my name, you can find all these little marches for, supporting the rights of seniors and things like that. So, I don't know if you were looking for that kind of a statement, or did we just forget to talk about something?
No, I'm asking you. I know from what I wrote and what people have asked me to ask the candidates. No, all my bases were covered.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that all your bases were covered. And like I said, this is about you talking to us neighbors. And what you had just said, I'm glad you said it, because I think we might have touched upon some of those bullet points, but really didn't, deep dive into it. But that's why, we're doing this.
Right.
And with that in mind, Susannah Myers, congratulations on your win.
Thank you so much.
Because I gotta be right with somebody. So
I know you say that to everyone.
Yes.
I'm still going to take it personally, though. I'm going to pat myself on the back. Danny thinks I'm going to win.
There you go. And boy, let me tell you, my name. Don't ever Google my name. I'm joking. But anyway, I want to thank you, and I'm going to stop the recorder wherever the Zoom stop is, because I do want to talk to you a little bit more.
Yeah. Can I mention, though,
Sure.
just because I have to do that, if anybody wants to get in touch, my email address and my cell phone number are actually on my website. It's susannahmeyer.com. And there's ways to email me through the website. You can send me an email. Like I said, you can call my cell. Campaigning right now is so challenging. And I love the idea that I'm trying to be accessible that way too. I want people to reach out if they have questions. And some of the interesting things that, you know, people are getting their neighborhoods together and having little Zoom with 5 neighbors and saying, can you come and talk about XYZ, and some of the issues that are specific to District 3 for that matter. So I love that. I think that should be encouraged. I want to hear from people. I mentioned I'm starting the way I plan to move forward. And so it's important to me to show that. And I respect most the elected officials, city level and beyond, who are accessible. So that's what I plan to emulate. That's what I'm going to be doing. So again, SusannahMeyer.com should have everything on there.
That's great. And honestly, I think you need to spell it out, because like
Oh.
Foreman, there are a couple of consonants that are missing in there, and Meyer is with an E, not an A. So
no, you're totally right. And my name gets, I get my name is wrong all the time. It's Savannah, it's Sienna. I mean, it's all over the place. So SusannahMeyer.com.
just like Oscar Meyer, M-E-Y-E-R. No, never mind.
Yep.
That's
an A, actually, that Meyer, and there's no S on the end of Meyer. And please, you know what, I'm on Facebook too for the campaign. Please feel free to reach out. My job at this point is to engage with as many people as I can and to reach as many people as I can and let you know that I'm here. So if you have suggestions about it, if you have topics you want to talk about, like I said, reach out, suggest away.
And the neighbors, they hear you and they're going to take advantage, I'm sure.
Good.
Susannah, again, thank you very much for your time. On behalf of the 8 or 9 people who are going to watch this, we thank you.
If you publish this, I'm going to post it on my website.
Oh, you'll see it later tonight.
So 5 more.
Yeah, so for 5 more, there you go. We'll get into double digits.
Between the 2 of us, we'll get to 20.
There you go. Thank you very much. I'm going to put you on stop recording, because there was a story I wanted to tell you that has nothing to do with politics. So.
Got it. Okay.